Certain games definitely defined a year or a decade, and today's game on Hibiki QUICKIE, I would say definitely is one of those games because Earthworm Jim screams 1990s. Now, the concept of Earthworm Jim, unfortunately, as most things in the 90s, tried to be a cash grab and was an attempt to capitalize on the popularity of characters such as Sonic, Mario, and other various mascots in gaming. Playmates Toys, who actually had success with licensing Ninja Turtles figures, was the brainchild with coming up with Earthworm Jim at the end of the day, and Douglas TenNapel is the one that sketched Earthworm Jim, with Shiny Entertainment, the one who developed the actual game, later buying the rights of the Earthworm Jim sketch. And the game finally saw the light of day in '94 for the Sega Genesis. It was published by Virgin Games, who previously worked on titles such as 7-Up's Cool Spot, had to conform to other companies' visions and had limitations, and that was definitely not the case with Earthworm Jim, as you can see is one of the most zany games ever, and Virgin definitely was relieved to not conform to other people's visions. The developer team behind Earthworm Jim is also responsible for Aladdin on Genesis, which is also another great game, and definitely shines through in some of the sprite work in Earthworm Jim. One of the most redeeming parts about this series to me is how off the wall and off kilter it is. Everything from character names to the origin of Jim himself. Which as Jim was just a regular earthworm, all of a sudden the suit crash landed out of the sky and fell on Jim, giving him superhuman strength and a human body, which is ridiculous, but it works. At no point during Earthworm Jim does it try to be generic or status quo in any of it. From the plot, where you would think where in any other 2D platformer you would just save the princess, you often save Princess What's Her Name, which is her literal name, I didn't just be lazy and make that up, from the clutches of her evil sister, get this, Queen Pulsating Bloated, Festering Sweaty, Pus-Filled, Malformed, Slug for a Butt. That's her name, and that's awesome. One of the most memorable parts of this game, especially for me, is the voice of Jim himself, which is done by Jim Cummings, the legendary voice actor who's done such work as the voice of Darkwing Duck, Pete from Mickey Mouse, and Dr. Robotnik from the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon series, just to name a few. As soon as you start the game, you know you're in for something completely different. You start in the junkyard, which is mainly consisted of tires, which is fun to bounce around on. The basic controls of the game are pretty awesome. You can fire in 8 directions, whip with your head, you can sling with your head a la Castlevania style, and you can also break your fall while pressing the jump button while in midair, spinning your head like a propeller on a helicopter, which is hilarious. They didn't spare any expense in using every gimmick of Jim being an earthworm to his fullest extent, and I can appreciate it. I don't want to keep harping on how much detail actually went into the game, but when I say the sprite work is amazing, it truly is in like the top 3 from that era. And another great thing you can say about the game, it never tries to be something for too long and lets you settle in. It mixes it up a good bit. For every level there's something new to do and something different to check out, like bungee jumping through a level or flying a glass ship around like a madman, which is probably one of the hardest parts of the game. At the end of the day, Earthworm Jim is a must-play, one of my favorite games from this era, one of my favorite games in general. It's a really big shame what happened to the series in later days. Maybe, possibly, there's a gleaming, shimmering hope that it will come back, but that's something to look forward to. This is Earthworm Jim for the SNES. Hey guys, Travis here from Hibiki TMB, reminding you as always to follow me on Twitter at the Hibiki TMB. Check out the Reset Button podcast with myself and Tannen, Hibiki Quickie, Hibiki History, Retrospectives, everything in between, retro gaming, and pro wrestling, not to mention my other podcast with the man himself, Michael.
Hey, you dirty fucking pigs. This is Mike from the Slam Pigs Podcast, reminding you to check us out on Twitter at the Slam Pigs Podcast, or check me out on Twitter at Mike the Slam Pig, Or Travis, where can they find that other show?
They can find everything in between right here on Hibiki TMD.